Guys, this is going to be my last tutorial for the day. It's going to be about programming etiquette, and I'm actually going to use a forum post that I found kind of on etiquette and improving the readability of your code. So credit goes out to Zorologic from dreamencode.net. So basically what this tutorial is about is there's three parts: indentation, line breaks, and comments. It's going to increase the readability of your program, and if you're new, it's going to increase the readability to you as well, not just people looking over your code. So the first part, indentation. So what that is it means that when you look inside of your program, everything, as you can see right here, it starts pretty much, right next to the start of your line, I guess, on the left side. It'll start there, and then every time you open up a new line, a new block, so every time you use a little squiggly bracket, and then anything inside those squiggly brackets is a block. So every time you open up a new block, everything should be tabbed one space. Okay, so see, this is the beginning of the program, so this is like the first block, so it doesn't need anything. When we open up a new block, we tab it one space. So if you look in here, we started at the beginning because we closed it, and every time we close it, we, the next block we start, minus one tab. So as you can see here, we open up a new block with our square brackets, so this is tabbed, okay? Now look, so now we have a for loop, and it opens up a new block because we have a little squirrely bracket there. So this one is tabbed over one more, so everything in this block should be tabbed twice. Looks like we open up a new block here with an if statement, and so as you can see, we start to, we continuously tab, and then as we close them, our tabs become less, and less. So that'll be a little bit more apparent in this example here. So I would recommend that you always just indent with the tab. Most of your IDEs like JCreator and stuff like that are going to automatically do this for you, but if you don't understand how indenting will work, you may decide that you want to do it a different way. I know a lot of you have submitted code, and I've looked over it, and a lot of it is just impossible to read, and the first thing I have to do before I can even try to give an answer is I have to go through all of the code and give it proper, comments and stuff like, and indentation and line breaks and stuff like that, just so I can read it. And I feel like if you guys did that right off the bat, you may be able to solve a lot of your own problems. Not to call anyone out, I'm just saying. So, when to indent is the easiest part of the whole thing. Start with zero indentation, left justified, smack against the left side of the screen. Then, for every open block, you should be indenting one more unit, tab or a number of spaces. Typically, like I said, tabs are going to work just fine. For every closed block, you should indent one less. And this is for Java. Java, you can use tabs. Sometimes you can't use tabs. You have to use spaces. Just depends. So as you can see here, the code flow should kind of look like a curve, like this. So as you can see, as we open up more blocks, it starts to curve more inwards, and then as it closes everything, it goes back to the line. So second part is line breaks, which is, in my opinion, very important. What line breaks means is that you take your block of code or whatever and you space it, putting a couple extra enters in between things, just like you would in an English paper. Every time you start a new logic, a new train of thought, something like that, typically you start a new paragraph. And when you start a new paragraph is you put like a break in between the paragraphs. So as you can see here in his writing, he's got a line here, and then kind of breaks off before getting the part 2. That's what I'm talking about. So in code, the way you would do that is typically the general rules are whenever you make a class, you put a double break in there. So pretend this line of comment wasn't here, so it'd just be a space here. So I started typing and I hit enter, went down to this line, I hit enter again, and then I start my method. So always put a break in between your classes and your methods. And then, as you can see here, inside of this method or whatever, I start declaring a few things. And so this is just declarations. Okay, it has nothing to really do with the logical portion of our code. So once we get to this is the actual kind of like what are we doing here type stuff. So you see how they put like a break in between them. So that helps a lot when you're trying to do specific things like that. It'll take your code and make it a lot easier for people to read. You can also take the code and almost kind of portion it out, so you could even in your head name, okay, this is declarations. Okay, declarations stopped because I have a space here. Now this is the code. You can sort through that kind of stuff. I also put the same double break in between methods as well. So this method here should be have a blank space in between the next method. So the next and the biggest thing is comments. Comments are created thusly: to create a single line comment, use the double slash. Everything on the line following that symbol will be shown and treated as a comment. If your comments need to take more than one line, you can either use multiple single line comments or sandwich your comments between the slash asterisk and asterisk slash. So like this. And again, everything between those is shown and treated as a comment. So this one is really helpful, especially if you need to comment out a line or like a block of code, just to make sure it doesn't get ran. If the purpose of a bit of code is not immediately obvious, it should probably be commented. Keep your comments on point, use good English, and keep it brief. Also, on a larger scale, it is sometimes helpful to comment a method or a larger section of code and explain briefly what you're trying to accomplish with it. If the purpose of a line of code is immediately obvious, like a variable declaration, you don't need to comment it. So like int a equals 1, I don't need to comment that. That's obvious. I know I'm setting a to 1, I don't need to say I'm setting a to 1. That's not the point. But and I'll show you some examples of comments here in a second on when you should use them. However, you may wish to do so if you want to explain what the variable will be used for. So in case some people do shorthand code where they'll use like a variable inside of like a for loop or something like that, and they'll put like A and C. Well, in the comments above that for loop, they'll put A equals, and they'll say what the A actually means. A might mean age, and C might mean, I don't know, something else. They'll just say that, but just because they want to keep their for loop small, they'll just use A and C. I see that a lot in professional programming. So let me go ahead and show you real quick. Just a few examples of programming etiquette. As you can see here, I put my spaces in between a lot of stuff. I try to keep my ints all on the same line. I haven't really cleaned up this a whole lot, but as you can see, I keep my array lists kind of the same. My strings for my default username and password are on the same line. And then what I do here in my init is I see how you can pretty much look at everything and see it's a block of code, like bam, bam, and what I do is I label that, especially for my initialization. You don't need to comment everything because it's just initialization. So as you can see, this portion here gets the width and height of the application. This is my layout. and then I set JLabels, so everything under here is going to be JLabels. So then I have my JLabel header, input 1, input 2, input 3, notification. Then now we have JText fields. So I have username, J password field, password, password 2. You can see kind of the format I go through when I do that. Everything is nice and spaced. You know that all of this code, you can immediately assume that it belongs to all this comment here. J, that's a J button. So now when we look at a little bit more code, this is just action performed. I mean, it's a Java default method. I don't need to comment on it too much. And it's pretty straightforward what happens. It's just a switch statement mode. So I put spaces in between all my cases so it's easier to read. And it's pretty easiest because case login, attempt login. So this method name, attempt login, that is pretty obvious. So, and if you need to know more about it, you can go down to the method, and I'll explain in a second, or create new user. See how those are very obvious method names? So it should be pretty obvious what it does. This one, switch modes, might be a little bit more different. So let's go ahead and find switch modes real quick. So switch modes. See what I do above every method that I create myself? I put it inside of a larger comment block. So I do public void switch modes. I always type out what I want. Checks to see which mode is currently set, then switches it to the opposite mode. Changes between register and login. So that's pretty easy. As you can see, I haven't cleaned up a lot of this code yet, but like I said, I like to put spaces in between all of my kind of blocks of code. This one here, I'm still trying to figure out how I could possibly make these blocks of code a little bit more efficient, but essentially all they do is they just change the text, all the buttons and JLabels, and then set them at different locations and hide them and show them. So, but as you can see, before every method I make, I have a block of code that will, tell them what it does. And in my bigger lines of code here, where it gets really kind of complicated, for all my else statements, I'll put, because it's kind of hard to, because you have an if statement, and then if that isn't true, then you go down to this else statement, then it's kind of hard to know what all the else statements do because you have to try to match them up. So this is kind of an example of where maybe we should put some spaces in there to make it a little bit more legible. As you can see, it does. So, but after every else statement, it says what makes this else statement happen. So if password and password 2 J password field do not match, then this happens. If password field is 0 characters long, this happens. If username field is 0 characters long, then this happens. And then this one, it lets the user know that the desired username already exists. I guess I could put if username already exists, like that. So as you can see, comments are very important. They you don't have to necessarily, as you can see, not all my code is perfect and clean and spacing and stuff like that, but I would highly recommend that you get in the habit of doing so. And you don't necessarily have to do it right away. Like, let's say your brain's just like, okay, I need to program this. I got it in my head, I don't want to lose it. You just program it and then come back to it like I just did and comment it up and then do that. But if you can add comments to your own program, that means you understand it. And if you understand it, that means you should know what to do. You should be able to fix it if anything goes wrong, stuff like that. So, alright, well, I hope this helps when it comes to programming etiquette. Like I said, it's an extremely important part of programming, and especially if you want help from other people. If people can't read your code, you're not going to get as much help as if you knew how to comment everything, put it in the correct format, space it evenly, stuff like that. So it's just like having good handwriting almost. Alright, have a good one.